All India Radio presents Morning News. Good morning, I'm Sunil Verma. The headlines. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to present Union Budget 2023-24 in Parliament today. Economic Survey envisages Indian economy to grow at 6.5% in 2023-24 fiscal. Chief Economic Advisor says India to be $5 trillion economy by 2025-26. GST collection in January touches over 150,000 crore rupees. First G20 Education Working Group meeting to begin in Chennai today. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval launches US-India initiative on critical and emerging technologies with his US counterpart in Washington. And in cricket, the third and final T20 international between India and New Zealand to be played in Ahmedabad this evening. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will present the Union Budget for the financial year 2023-24 in the Parliament today. Ms. Sitharaman will present it in the Lok Sabha at 11 a.m. The copy of the budget will be laid on the table of the Rajya Sabha soon thereafter. A meeting of the Union Cabinet will be held in the morning to approve the Union Budget 2023-24. After getting the nod from the Cabinet, Ms. Sitharaman will present the Union Budget in Parliament. The Finance Minister and her team will also call on President Draupadi Murmu before presenting the budget. Speaking to media before the beginning of the budget session of Parliament yesterday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said, India's budget is an attempt to meet the hopes and aspirations of the common citizens.
आज के वैश्विक परिस्थिति में भारत के बजट के तरफ न सिर्फ भारत का लेकिन पूरे विश्व का ध्यान है। डावाडोल विश्व की आर्थिक परिस्थिति में भारत का बजट भारत के सामान्य मानवी की आशा आकांक्षाओं को तो पूरा करने का प्रयास करेगा ही, लेकिन विश्व जो आशा की किरण देख रहा है उसे वो और अधिक प्रकाशमान नजर आए। मुझे पूरा भरोसा है निर्मला जी इन अपेक्षाओं को पूर्ण करने के लिए भरपूर प्रयास करेंगे।
Chief Economic Advisor, CEA, Dr. V. Ananta Nageshwaran has said that the Indian economy is expected to grow at 6.5% in 2023-24 and the range is projected between 6 and 6.8%. Addressing a press conference in New Delhi on the highlights of Economic Survey 2022-23 yesterday after its presentation in the Parliament, Dr. Nageshwaran said India's GDP growth is expected to remain robust in financial year 2023-24. He added that India's economy is poised to do better in the remainder of this decade. The reforms in the last 8 years have brought inclusive growth.
The reforms of the last 8 years basically spans multiple dimensions. It is not purely about economic reforms for higher growth. It is also about inclusive growth, financial inclusion, banking cleanup, the creation of the digital public infrastructure and contribution to healthy India, ease of living, physical infrastructure creation, facilitating investments, transparent taxes and tax administration, ease of doing business and farmers' welfare. So broadly speaking, about 10 areas we have covered here. These reforms were happening even as the banking cleanup was going on.
Dr. Nageshwaran says that International Monetary Fund, in its World Economic Outlook update, has maintained India's GDP forecast for current financial year at 6.8% and at 6.1% during next financial year. He said for financial year 2024-25, GDP is projected at 6.8%. The CEA added that recovery of economy is complete and non-banking and corporate sectors now have healthy balance sheets. He said we have to look ahead to the next phase of India's economic growth process.
The survey looks ahead to the medium term because the pandemic response and recovery phase is over. In fact, Chapter 1, the title itself says, State of the Economy, Recovery Complete. And therefore, after a long time, we have banking, non-banking and corporate sectors with healthy balance sheets and they are ready to borrow and lend and invest. So we don't have to speak about pandemic recovery anymore. We have to look ahead to the next phase of India's economic growth process.
Later, talking to a news agency, the Chief Economic Advisor said India has the potential to grow at 6.5 to 7% and will become 5 trillion economy by 2025-26 and 7 trillion by 2030, depending on exchange rate fluctuation. He said Indian economy is estimated to touch $3.5 trillion mark by March this year.
$3.5 trillion will be likely size of India's GDP by March 2023. There are episodes when the rupee has strengthened, and in those periods India's dollar GDP has even grown at double-digit rates. In general, if we take a 10% growth rate in dollar terms, because let's say the US interest rate cycle peaks at some point and dollar strength also peaks at some point, which probably it already has, can look ahead to 10% growth in India's dollar GDP. And in general, when you grow at 10%, the value doubles in about 7 years. Subject to a lot of assumptions, if India's dollar GDP grows at 10% per annum from 2024 onwards, by 2030, you could be looking at a $7 trillion economy.
The second highest gross GST collection has been made this month, breaching earlier second highest record in October last year. Over 1,55,000 crore rupees gross GST revenue has been collected in the month of January. It is the second highest collection ever, after 1,68,000 crore gross collection in April last year. January's collection includes CGST of 28,963 crore, SGST of 36,730 crores, and IGST of 79,599 crores. GST collection has crossed 1,50,000 crore mark for the third time in 2022-23. Revenues in the current financial year up to January this year are 24% higher than the GST revenues during the same period last year. This is All India Radio giving you the news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on our Twitter handle at AIR News Alerts.
Budget 2023. What makes the headlines? What matters most for the people, markets, sectors, industry and the nation? Join All India Radio News for a special live day-long program on Union Budget for an in-depth analysis by experts, special budget bulletins, people's reaction on the budget and exclusive interviews. Tune into the FM Gold channel 100.1 MHz of All India Radio and other frequencies from 10:10 a.m. to 10 p.m. on Wednesday, that's 1st of February. It will also be available on our app News on AIR and our YouTube channel News on AIR Official.
In Uttarakhand, all schools will open in disaster-affected Joshimath from today. The administration had set up temporary relief camps in some schools for affected people and to accommodate NDRF and SDRF personnel engaged in relief and rescue operations. Now these schools have been evacuated and inmates are shifted to other places. Chamoli's Chief District Education Officer Kuldeep Gairola said that 2 unsafe schools will be run in rented buildings. He said that 24 students appearing for board exams have requested to shift the exam center out of Joshimath. Their request is accepted and now they can appear in the exams wherever they want. There are 28 government and private schools in Joshimath. Political activities have intensified in the northeastern state of Meghalaya after filing of nominations began yesterday. Candidates can find their nomination papers till February the 7th. The scrutiny will be held on the 8th and last date for withdrawal of candidature is 10th of February. All 12 districts in the state will vote to elect 60 members of the State Assembly on the 27th of this month. We have more from our correspondent.
There is a saying for Meghalaya that weather and political loyalties are very unpredictable here. In last assembly elections, Congress was the biggest party with 21 seats and Trinamool Congress was having no members. Later, former Congress CM Mukul Sangma and other MLAs of the party switched loyalties and now TMC is the main opposition in this election. The ruling Meghalaya Democratic Alliance coalition was led by CM Conrad Sangma's National People's Party, United Democratic Party, People's Democratic Front, Hill State People's Democratic Party and the BJP. Now all alliance partners are fighting independently, so there will be multi-corner fight this time. Sushil Chandra Tiwari, AIR News, Shillong.
In Gujarat, Oreva Group Managing Director Jaisukh Patel surrendered before a court in Morbi yesterday in connection with the suspension bridge collapse tragedy. Patel was named as an accused in the charge sheet filed by the police on Friday. He surrendered before the court of the Chief Judicial Magistrate, which had issued an arrest warrant against him. He had also moved an anticipatory bail plea. Our correspondent reports that Oreva Group was responsible for the operation and maintenance of the suspension bridge on the Matchu River in Morbi that collapsed on October the 30th last year, claiming the lives of more than 130 people. The first G20 Education Working Group meeting will begin in Chennai today. Union Minister of State for Information and Broadcasting, Dr. L. Murugan, will inaugurate the session where deliberations will take place on carrying forward the resolutions passed during the last summit. Discussions will be held on K-12 education, tech-enabled learning and skill development. The delegates were present for the seminar held yesterday. After today's discussions, the G20 delegation will be taken to Mamallapuram for sightseeing. In the evening, there will be a cultural presentation on the sumptuous food of Tamil Nadu. Foreign Secretary Vinay Mohan Kwatra and the U.S. Under-Secretary of State for Political Affairs, Victoria Nuland, co-chaired the annual India-US Foreign Office consultations yesterday in New Delhi. The Ministry of External Affairs said both sides agreed to work together during India's ongoing G20 presidency. They also agreed to intensify cooperation in multilateral fora and international organizations, including the UN, on global issues of mutual interest. Earlier, the External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar met Ms. Nuland. In a tweet, Dr. Jaishankar said they had a good talk on the Indian subcontinent, the Indo-Pacific and the convergences in Indo-US relationships. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval and his U.S. counterpart Jake Sullivan formally launched the U.S.-India Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technology, ICET, in Washington. The United States and India concluded the U.S.-India ICET meeting and also decided to launch a new innovation bridge. The Indian Embassy in the U.S. said in a tweet that the ICET announced by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Biden. It reflects India-US Convention of Strategic, Commercial and Scientific Approaches in the field of technology. The White House said in a statement that Innovation Bridge will connect both countries' defense startups. The third and final T20 international between India and New Zealand will be played in Ahmedabad today. Winning today's match will help Hardik Pandya-led side to not just win the series but also to maintain its number one ranking. The match will start at 7 in the evening. The series is now level at 1-1. The visitors won the first match by 21 runs in Ranchi, while hosts won the second T20I in Lucknow by 6 wickets to level the series. And now, for a look at today's newspapers, it's over to VC Pramod.
Thank you, Sunil. Economic Survey pegs financial year 24 GDP growth at 6 to 6.8% on global headwinds, writes the Hindu business line. Hindustan Times quotes IMF as saying that India is poised to grow fastest among major economies. The Chief Economic Advisor has said that the recovery from the pandemic was complete and India will perform in this decade due to government reforms, reports the Tribune. The Hindu quotes Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Y.S. Jagan Mohan Reddy as saying the state capital would be shifted to Visakhapatnam in a few months, even as multiple petitions on the issue are pending in the Supreme Court. Adultery decriminalization verdict of 2018 not valid for armed forces, says Supreme Court, is the headline in the Pioneer. In a 15-day enforcement drive, Noida police will seize petrol vehicles over 15 years and diesel over 10 years to check pollution, writes the Times of India. And finally, with average minimum at 6.6 degrees Celsius, Delhi suffered its coldest January in 10 years. And with that, it's back to you, Sunil.
Thank you, VC Pramod. And now, before we end the bulletin, the headlines once again. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to present Union Budget 2023-24 in Parliament today. Economic Survey envisages Indian economy to grow at 6.5% in 2023-24 fiscal. Chief Economic Advisor says India to be $5 trillion economy by 2025-26. GST collection in January touches over 1,50,000 crore rupees. first G20 Education Working Group meeting to begin in Chennai today. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval launches US-India initiative on critical and emerging technologies with his US counterpart in Washington, and in cricket the third and final T20 international between India and New Zealand to be played in Ahmedabad this evening. And with that, we end the morning news. Have a nice day.